quality banter of basement quality, episode 52. Good evening, Angus. Do you have a beverage?
I do. I've got a fresh out of the fermenter lager.
Ooh, nice.
Not cold, hasn't cold crashed. Basically, I'm out of beer. So, raided the fermenter.
Got to do what you got to do. Caesar.
Yes, I do. On the back of Angus's talking about it last week, I went down to the shops and got a Feral Biggie, the East Coast IPA. So, happy days. Cheers.
Hazy boy. Jumped into my stash and got the Bacchus Yumstick 3, which is the Choc Mint Nut Ice Cream Pastry Stout. So think Choc Mint Drumstick, they can't call it that, Yumstick, 12%, 375ml.
You've really been chasing diabetes with the last 2 or 3 potties.
The face too.
I have, and that one's really yum. It is literally, Choc Mint Drumstick, beautiful. So straight into beer news. Well, first of all, how's the home brew? Is it nice? Your lager?
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I can still taste there's a fair bit of yeast in it, so I haven't cold crashed it or anything. It's right at the end of fermenting. It's 1009 and should go down maybe a couple more points.
You just couldn't wait?
I've got no other beer.
Yeah.
Well, I do have one, but it's the same one as next week, so I didn't want to drink 2 in a row.
Fantastic. So yeast in suspension, and speaking of yeast in suspension, how's your biggie going?
It's not too bad. I had a bit of a cold this week, so it's hard to taste, but I can still get it. So it's still quite nice and flavoursome.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm going to say, though, it's not very basement quality when we're already prepared for next week, Angus.
Yeah, well, it's the... it'll make sense next week. It's not going to make sense to anybody else now.
Yeah. So, Angus, you had a couple of beer stories, starting with the IBA with the Queensland Government and COEX.
Yes, this is a bit of a long one, and I will do some reading in some bits. So the IBA has their sights set on a Queensland government proposal this week. So Gavin Croft from Slipstream and Kristen McGarry from Your Mates recently represented the IBA at a Queensland Parliamentary Committee hearing that is proposing some reforms to the container deposit scheme. Long story short, it's not great. So these reforms are located in the formerly named Waste Reduction and Recycling Strengthening the Container Refund Scheme Amendment Bill. The main points that Gavin and Kristen were, I guess, bringing to the members of the committee was basically the only effect these changes will have will increase the cost of beer, driving regional breweries to closure. Basically, it amounts to just double taxation from a brewery point of view. It's not formally a tax, but as far as they're concerned, it's just another government cost to producing a beer. So, in everything but the name. And lastly, and probably most annoyingly, the brewing industry received no meaningful consultation with the changes, and they were given very, very little time to provide a considered response to the committee. During the article, I can't remember whether it was Gavin or Kristen, but they made the point that there's been no real strong consultation with the brewing industry since about 2011.
Yeah.
So, not a great look. So kind of digging into some of the points, Gavin made the point that already the CDS makes up about 8% of the cost of their pale ale, And then once wholesale and retail margins and GST and excise and blah, blah, that results to around $6 of a carton cost, which you then measure against a max refund of $2.40 if every can is returned to a recycling center. So already not really adding up. Kristen mentioned that the compliance cost to his larger brewery has recently increased by 70%, or roughly an extra $7 per carton. So, and that $7 isn't going towards brewery improvements or employing more people, innovations in brewing processes, purely compliance cost. And then moving on to the proposed 20,000 container exemption. So basically, if you produce less than 20,000 containers of beer per year, then you're exempt from the increased costs. Kristen made the point that they'd exceed that threshold canning their first batch of beer.
Yeah.
So they're already not exempt putting out their first batch. And Kristen estimated that around 70% of Queensland small breweries would pretty much exceed that threshold, making it fairly meaningless for the majority of Queensland small breweries.
Yeah.
So again, and that's where this kind of lack of consultation comes from. They've just, I don't know whether they just pluck some numbers out of the air or that's that's their goal, but doesn't really seem to work in practice. What else? Yeah, the threshold is just a single figure, a single threshold. So breweries just under the threshold are more profitable than a brewery that just gets over the threshold, which doesn't make a great deal of sense. And Kristen mentioned a sliding scale would make a lot more sense, and a starting figure of 1 million containers, which would that threshold would exceed most of the breweries that the ATO already classifies as small breweries. So that, again, that's kind of a figure where like asking someone from the industry will get you better information to base decisions on, and instead of, I don't know, plucking figures out of your ass or wherever that 20,000 container threshold came from.
Yeah.
So I did a little bit of digging on the CDS. So it's viewed as a not-for-profit. So it doesn't provide distributions, no dividends. So I guess the base idea is that any profits that are made above operating expenses are then put back into improving the recycling scheme, providing more recycling centers, that sort of thing. So I'll read some of this. Some of the latest figures I managed to find. So it's earned over $2.5 billion in total revenue since it started in, I think, was it 2018? Is that when it started? I read the
Yeah,
read
it
the year,
sounds
but I
about
didn't
right.
write it down.
18 or 19 in
Yeah.
Queensland. Yeah.
Yeah. So over $2.5 billion in revenue, more than 12 billion containers returned, which I think that's good. Yeah, that's 12 billion containers that can be reused. Less than 40% of the scheme fees have been returned in the 10-cent refunds. So the government is currently holding around $1.3 billion in scheme fees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and given that the scheme is operated as a not-for-profit, these funds are, like I said, not distributed as dividends or returns and are meant for reinvestment. So given the concerns of the amount of cash that's been held, there's also sections in this proposal in how to deal with that, what should be done with that money, and that's the bit that I didn't read up on. I didn't have time.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just again, it just seems like with that lack of consultation with the brewing industry, just seems it's doing a lot of harm for really not much good.
It's a really flawed system, and we've mentioned it a few times with Coex being part of, their Visi line and Asahi and the IBA are all actually on that board of Coex, which looks after WA and Queensland. And South Australia have been doing it since, I think, the 80s. They had the 5 cent refund, 80s or 90s. But like I've said it a few times, every time I go to New South Wales or if I come back from Bathurst or something like that, you go to one of their reverse vending machines and there's piles of cans out the front that the machines have rejected because those barcodes haven't been registered in that state for that product. So it sort of defeats the purpose. And that means every limited release beer that every brewery makes has to register that barcode in all the different container deposit schemes. And remember, the whole idea of it is it's actually a litter reduction scheme. It is not a recycling program. So I think a couple of points I've said a couple of times is I really think we need a national program, and I don't think the producers should be paying for it. I think the end companies that receive the material that's been crushed and for recycling to be used again, I think they're the companies that should be paying for the implementation of the program. So I am talking Visi and Aurora and those companies that are getting, shipping containers worth of crushed steel, aluminium, glass. I think they should be using that. In addition, there should be products there included. So if you've got a flavored milk, you get your 10 cents. If it's non-flavored, you don't. If it's coconut milk, you don't. If it's a V8 juice, you don't. If it's orange juice, you do. Like, there's lots of really silly rules in it because it's about single use. So the idea is you only get your 10 cent on a single use. The spirit industry, they've got the Queensland Coex scheme. They do the 10 cent in spirits in Queensland and WA. So, you could sell a 1.75 litre bottle of Jack Daniels and do 10 cents. Or you might not know, the 50 mil miniatures, also 10 cents.
Yep.
So that 20,000, like as a percentage of that product, a $5-6 miniature, 10 cents. So
like 20,000.
It's in proportion. There's no proportionate part of that. And if you were doing, miniatures in every bottle shop, that 20,000 limit, like beer, would be gone very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm glad they're talking about it. I'm disappointed that there wasn't much consultation before. Super glad that Gavin and Christian got onto that, and we'll wait and see until the next lot of news comes, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a little bit. So back to what you're talking about, Angus. So nationally, it's kind of hard with the providers for the recycling scheme. For example, I know back end Scouts South Australia run the container scheme down there, whereas up in Queensland, I am a Scout leader. We didn't get the contract for that overall, but we were a collector, but we have just recently got rid of our stake. I think Containers for Change just picked that one up, so they're getting a bit bigger. And on that, so when you're talking about scans, particularly for, say, for people like us that get steward packs and stuff and craft beers that aren't registered, in Queensland, the Container for Change depots, the big ones, they only scan they don't even scan barcodes. They just literally sort it. So I used to always take my steward packs to those places. There's one at Acacia Ridge. There's one over at next to the Alderley police station. And you can go in there and they will just give it to you, and they'll give you straight as cash. You don't have to, not like New South Wales where you've got to go to Woolies and you get a voucher for next time you shop. So just a little thing to know there. makes it a little bit easier, but that definitely makes it tough. Back what you're saying, that nationally is not, you got to have a lot of people come together and or federally make it up, because the states basically decide at the moment who gets what.
Yeah, so the problem though is you didn't pay the 10 cents to get that 10 cents return, but the producer paid
Yes.
13.5 cents
Yeah.
for that system. Like, there's got to be accountability as well. And I think even more so the smaller craft producers. You think of someone like Range, who comes out with a release every fortnight at least. Every one of those barcodes would have to be registered in all those different schemes, and I think Victoria's got 3 schemes. So it just doesn't work. And I even remember, like, as you know, I work at Dan's, and we had people price matching in different states where the schemes weren't running because they were $2.40 cheaper a carton. But now everyone's got a scheme that's come on board. But I still think we really need to go with a national scheme, and something that's a bit fairer.
Yeah, and like when I did that research into the figures, like when I worked out that they're holding $1.3 billion in cash, right?
That's just the Queensland one, isn't it?
So that's just Queensland. So that's $1.3 billion that's not in breweries' pockets, paying people, spending money locally, employing people, tradies, like, all that money just sitting with the government that's not being circulated.
Making them interest.
Yeah.
And I think the companies that run the COEX, like Visi and Aurora and the packaging people, I think they're the ones who are making the money out of it. And I think they're the ones who should pay for the system. And then if there's some left over, let's look at ways that we can, make the collection easier and things like that. Yeah.
Because isn't technically, though, where, like, when we are buying, we are the consumer. We do pay that 10 cents. They're meant to add that onto the cost, but of course, like you said, it doesn't always. When they're paying 13.5, yeah, you're right. It should be. It's almost, yeah.
But remember, you're paying GST on top of that.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you pay your 1 cent GST for the recycling.
Yeah, I think when I was brewing a little while ago, it was the cost. Like, you have to declare how many cans you've sold or bottles you've sold, and the cost to the manufacturer, the producer, it was 13.5, 14 cents a unit. If you got a smaller can, it's going to cost more. If you got a bigger can, you're going to sell less. It's it's tough.
I think the big positive I take is that the IBA got to sit in front of the committee and say their piece. It's been 2011 since there's been any serious consultation. So the fact that they were able to, get bums on seats in front of the committee members and give them an idea of how these changes will affect real businesses and real people in Australia, I think that's a positive, and the IBA is doing a good job. Yeah,
I hope Christian, the fact that he said 20,000 units would be less than a batch, I hope that rung home for him.
Yeah. I mean, admittedly, your mates is pretty massive, but the point still stands. Like, he's done 100%. In 1 batch, and other breweries are done in 3 batches.
Yeah,
so they're doing 4 batches a month. That they're over the threshold.
Well, what's the pallet, Luke?
Of
cans.
What are you cartons to 24 packs?
No, what's a pallet of cans? If you got empty cans, how many is on a pallet when you get them in?
It depends on the size of the can, but you're looking like 1,300 a layer, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's easy, like 1380 a layer. So, a pallet, easy. You've got half of that already, and if your mates, if you've got a big batch, you're doing, 14, 15 pallets a batch. So Anyway, watch this space. But like you said, good. I think it's actually good, and I'm glad they were part of that. You had our friends at Helios.
Yeah, so this is the Helios tap room closing down. So they've got adverts all over socials about that closing down and been the last day. So that's from 12 until 8 p.m. with Rocco's mobile catering service, which I haven't eaten from before and have no idea what they have. So interestingly, I saw a post on the socials saying they were brewing a beer on what date was it? The 26th of April.
Yep.
So
I did see that too.
That may not even be packaged yet. So they must still be selling beer with wholesale or maybe door sales, but no tap room. So that's something interesting that I picked up on.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to extend, maybe use some of the materials they've got or something like that. He even mentions, Scott even mentioned about contract brewing. So while the tap room might be gone, yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. But I do like seeing all the love, and I know me and a couple of friends have shared like some of our Helios journey on our pages, and it's fun seeing some of the old stuff. So it's going to be sad to lose them. Well, I guess we'll just see what happens if they can live on in some form, or even just continue to be contract brewers, which would help keep a couple of the people employed.
Yep.
And that ties neatly into the US Brewery Almanac.
Yeah. So I found this afternoon when I was just having a random look for stuff. So US Brewery Almanac, who some of the beers they produce are absolutely delicious sour beers. I remember having a bunch of Almanacs probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I put all the dregs in my barrels in the shed. So they've partnered with Air Capture to create the first commercial CO2 capturing system for carbonating beers. So quite a few pro breweries ferment certain beers. Lagers are pretty popular under pressure, which means you can just run it at a higher temperature, and the pressure helps control esters and what you'd normally be doing with a much lower ferment temperature to partially carbonate the beers, and then you just top up the carbonation once you go into the bright tanks. So the idea of capturing CO2 from the atmosphere in your car park and using that to top up carbonation, I think seems like a really cool idea. You're going to avoid the CO2 shortages that have been going around the last few years. Reduce costs, you don't have to bring CO2 in. So yeah, looks pretty cool.
I think the scrubbers, the filters are really expensive. But the more people who use it, that cost will come down. And CO2 and LPG are probably your two biggest energy costs, and for any commercial brewery. And if you can use what's in the atmosphere, bloody brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it. Caesar, you had some news from our friends at Hiker.
I do. So they put a post up today, Saturday, May 23rd, from 3 p.m. They're going to do braids and beers. So for all those dads out there, or mums, you can come along for an afternoon of practical skills, real connection, and a chance to learn how to braid while enjoying a beer with other legends doing the dad thing. Whether you're a seasoned pro or starting from scratch, this was worth getting into. So this has become quite popular. I know Archer have also been doing something similar. So they've got a couple of things going on. So for the north side of Brisbane. My wife's been pushing me. I've got a couple of years to worry about that, but my brother's got two girls that their hair's getting a bit long, so might use that as a bit of a nudge. So
yeah, I actually saw this in the States last year, and I thought it was a lovely way of it was dads, coming to learn how to do the girls' hairs, and they use like little mannequins with wigs and stuff, and have a beer and connect, and I love everything about it. I don't have girls and I don't have hair. What's really funny is both my sons, I think, are trying to rub it in because they have gorgeous, long, luscious locks. I think they're just rubbing it in.
Hey, Luke, let's not forget Sterlo had nice long golden hair and now he doesn't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
Yep.
my dad told me to braid years ago on the farm because he made his own leather goods. So he taught me how to braid or plait leather, sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm all right. I'm pretty good at plaiting Grace's hair. And when she was playing rugby last year, I bought one of those creepy head wigs and kind of taught myself how to do a French braid, which is the kind of like the braid in the hair. Wasn't very good at it though, but got a very rough idea of how to do it.
I'd just put headgear on for her and she'd be right.
all good.
Yeah, well, she didn't want to
You
wear
gotta
headgear.
learn, you gotta learn somehow.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great event. I hope heaps of dads go to that, and mums if they need to. That's great. And Dougal's beer is finally hit cans.
Yeah, so for those that know, Dougal's been pouring beers at the Hiker for 2 years now. So 2 years pouring beers, sharing laughs, growing an even bigger moustache, and being an all-around top bloke. Deserved something special, so he made his own beer based on his own recipe. So it's the Dougal Drought. It looks great. The can's got a nice big mo in it. Those who don't know, him and Angus tend to rival each other with the mows. So, and I've got a soft spot for Dougal. I used to work with him back when he was in school land. So he's always keen for a chat when I'm down there, having a drink or grabbing a carton or a couple of 4-packs.
Yeah, I think I spoke to him just after brewing, and it's his version of a 2 years old. So I reckon that'll be an absolute cracker. But yeah, like you said, you've got to have the mo to enjoy that one the most.
Yeah, apparently you get a discount if you got a moustache. That's what I heard.
Oh, really?
Nah.
I think you win on that one.
You can ask Phil about that one.
Yeah, just tell him Angus sent you. And if there's a problem with it, you know where to find us.
And then just quote base and quality banter, and Angus will cover the cost.
Yeah. Oh dear. Now we're in trouble.
I love 2 years old on tap, so 2 years old in a can from one of my favorite craft breweries. I'm in.
Yeah.
And 2 years old is definitely one of those ones. I spent a bit of time down in New South Wales, and when I go, it's an old country pub or something. You can't really guarantee you get anything that's not 2 years new or gold or Riches. So old is definitely the beer of choice when there's nothing else, and you can always guarantee you can get it old at least.
Yeah. Go to an RSL or a Bowls Club or something. Yeah, grab it on tap if you can.
It doesn't really matter how long it's been there. The line condition doesn't really matter. It's a solid choice.
And you had something about Lion.
Yeah, so the Australian put out a bit of an article a couple of days ago. So basically, Lion's partnered with OpenAI to help improve the demand on forecasting beer across the industry and wine and spirits as well. So reportedly, the first deal of its kind. The result is meant to be forecasting accuracy is nearly doubled. Market decisions now take that once a weeks now can happen in a couple of days. And AI factors in weather, consumer trends, retail shifts, and sporting events, which is good. So the partnership is helping Lions to respond faster to supply chain pressures. For those that worked in the industry in the time, you know that they go to a 24-hour schedule when it getting close to beer. We go close to Christmas and summer. So it's good. But the irony is that they were saying, so in the article, it actually talks about their biggest challenge wasn't really the tech. It was actually the organizational change. So around 80% of the effort they had was actually went into staff adaptation, planning, and internal processes. So, which is interesting to note. So a lot of, which makes sense too. A lot of the time, it's how you sell it to the stakeholders. They also have apparently developed an AI tool, like a codex, which is AI powered beer recommendation app called Joey. So I think AI is definitely, love it or hate it, it's there. AI, even if you're not using it for something like this for forecasting, still be really good for brewery owners and stuff like that, retail. But you can also use AI for SOPs and that sort of stuff, standard operating procedures, and getting a lot of that sort of stuff out there. It's just obviously, I always say, being in the industry, don't go putting proprietary stuff on there. Just keep it very vague if you are. Don't trust it with too much sensitive information. And obviously, if you're not paying for it, they're selling it. Basically, it's how it works. So if you don't pay for, so if you pay for, if you don't pay for ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, if you're not giving them anything in money, they're taking it in data.
Yeah.
So just aware of that.
If you're not paying them, you're the product.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
fair enough. It's a tool.
Interesting. I was reading an article today about Pocket OS integrating. They said which AI tool it was. I think it was Claude. And they integrated that, and somehow it has decided to delete the production database.
Ooh.
And also it somehow had access via the AI in the API into all their backups and deleted the last 3 months worth of backups as well.
Ouch.
So like, who's giving an AI tool access to their production database and like their disaster recovery / backup areas? Oh God.
This sounds like an episode of Silicon Valley.
Be careful, people. Jeez.
And is that our second PSA in 2 weeks in a row? Like,
oh, it might be, yeah.
We're going to start an educational podcast, guys. Like, really?
What happened? Yeah.
Oh dear. Alrighty.
It's not all bullshit.
Yeah, it's fair. So I think that's all our beer news. We're around the world with Angus.
Around the world with Angus. So today we're landing in Cape Town, South Africa.
True.
With a population just shy of 60 million people, which I knew they had a lot of people, but I didn't realize it was 60 million. They've got 12 recognized official languages. Probably the ones you've heard of are Afrikaans, English. I forgot to look up how to pronounce this. Xhosa, the XHOSA.
It's got a click. I think it's got a click. It's
Xhosa.
Yeah, clock.
Yeah, I know it's the clicky language. Yeah, and Zulu.
Yeah,
and then they got obviously 8 other ones, which I thought that was interesting. They got 12 languages. It'd be interesting to know when those 12 languages came on board as being the official languages, given their history, which I'll go into.
Yep.
Some brief history of South Africa. So they were quite happily kicking along with their indigenous inhabitants until around the middle of the 17th century, when the Dutch East India Company established a station at the Cape of Good Hope, now known as Cape Town. Dutch settlers, later called Boers or Afrikaners, expanded into the interior, sparking conflicts with the indigenous populations. British seized control of the Cape Colony in the late 18th century, and the discovery of diamonds and gold in the late 19th century triggered the Anglo-Boer War, which led to the creation of the Union of South Africa. Somewhat more recently, the National Party came to power in 1948 and instigated the apartheid system, which I guess might be a little bit mansplaining here, but a system of strict racial segregation and discrimination, targeting the black majority and removing many of their rights. And I didn't know this, their citizenship. So they were no longer South Africans.
Yeah.
This obviously saw the rise of many resistance movements. Probably the most famous one is the African National Congress and prominent figures like Nelson Mandela. In the early 90s, my grandmother recommended the book The Power of One by Bryce Courtenay, and that detailed a lot of what was happening in South Africa at that time, or at the time that Bryce wrote it. I think that was in the early 80s. Very eye-opening experience for a 12-year-old. I'll say that.
Brilliant
So
book.
that was a really interesting book, really good book. And they made a movie out of it, and Matt Damon was the lead character. It's a good movie too. It's one of those movies where it's almost as good as the book.
Yeah.
Moving on. Following decades of international sanctions, the apartheid system was dismantled in the early 1990s, and Nelson Mandela swept the first democratic multiracial elections in 1994. That also meant that the Springboks and many of their other sporting teams re-entered international competition, and the Springboks have not stopped bleating since. South Africa is now a democratic republic, and there's a lot of work going on to deal with, I guess, the repercussions of their recent history.
Yeah.
Onto craft beer. Quite a lot of craft breweries located in Cape Town. Some of the bigger ones, Devil's Peak Brewing Company gets a lot of mentions, and their King's Blockhouse IPA has been named on and off over the years South Africa's best beer. Afro-Caribbean Brewing Company are known for experimental beers, including the run of hazy IPAs, including Jungle Paradise. Moving further into the country, come to Soul Barrel Brewing, located in Franschhoek. I read how to pronounce that. I've forgotten. So they're located in the Western Cape, which is more known for vineyards and wineries. They've got like your normal offerings, pale ales, IPAs, but they also have a very strong focus on aged beers, wild fermented beers, barrel aged beers. So they got barrel aged bread IPAs, barrel aged imperial stouts, saisons, again barrel aged barley wines, and a gueuze, which is an interesting choice. The list of beers looks very interesting, and the brewery is set in an old winery, so the grounds are fantastic, and some of the areas I got set up for drinking look really enjoyable.
Yeah.
All right, so we're done with South Africa, and so I'm going to announce a slight change to Around the World with Angus. Given that most of us probably aren't going to get to any of these international brews I'm talking about, I'm going to alternate between Around the World and Around Australia with Angus. So that way I can start listing some Australian breweries and we can get to them. So don't want to mess with a format that seems to be working, or a format that no one's complaining about, I suppose. So I'll choose a random city, town, or suburb in Australia somewhere, talk about its history and interesting facts, and then talk about the breweries. So next week it'll be Around Australia with Angus.
Love it. Great idea. Because I don't think that the podcast is doing that well for us to visit some of these amazing places that you've mentioned.
It's just
I'd love
teasing,
to
isn't
go
it?
to South Africa. Yeah. And if we've ever pronounced anything incorrectly, you know where to find us. And Caesar, it's your turn to hold the brewery at random, and our turn to choose in 10-ish or so questions.
Yes, 100%. I'm ready to go.
Ready to go. Angus, you can go first.
Kick off. Australian brewery. That seems a pretty standard question.
Yes, Australian brewery.
Brewery.
What city would we find this brewery in?
Sydney.
That narrows
Been Have they been around a long time? Established?
This century.
Century.
Okay. Independent?
Yes.
Would they have come through the Queensland Beer Awards?
They would have.
Ooh.
Has their owner purchased beer festivals recently?
I don't think so.
Ooh.
Trying to think of some of the Sydney Brewery. Where's Sydney?
Yeah.
Rocks Brewing.
Yeah, that's part of Sydney Brewing. That's the people who bought Gabs. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it is too.
Yeah.
I think I spoke about them a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Another Sydney brewery. I'm drawing a blank.
Would we have seen them in Queensland bottle shops?
I haven't, but I know you two will know this. Actually, you know what? I may have lied to you. I did lie to you. They did purchase a festival.
Sydney Brewing?
Sydney Brewing.
Sydney Brewing?
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies. I looked it up. It was I had the old one, the old thing. I didn't see the new one come through. So yes, so Sydney Brewing. So Angus is quite a famous story. They always the beer awards. Oh, they went this year. I didn't see him. And they always seem to have the 10-litre or 5-litre keg, and they always do really well. So yeah, been a few times we've really had to look after the beers just to get it through the rounds. But the latest award that they received, 2025, they got champion cider producer at the AOBA. So that was their last thing that they did.
Yeah.
So founded in 2005, wasn't originally the Schwartz Brewery. So, and then became Sydney Brewery. Yes.
Yep. And I think they've taken over the White Bay site at Rosalie, I think. They've got the Newcastle Beer Festival. They've purchased Gabs. I think there's the Canberra Beer Festival. I think they've got
Canberra Beer Festival.
I think they took over the Rocks. I think they won champion beer at the Royal Queensland. Was it 4 years ago with their lager? It was
21.
Oh, I'm old. Okay.
2021 Grand Champion Beer, Sydney Brewery Pilsner.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I was close. Come on, give me a break.
I remember that beer. That was good.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be good for a lager to win champion beer against pale ales and IPAs and all these big flavored beers after judges have been drinking beer for 2 days straight and the palates are pretty wrecked.
That's why I was so excited with Slipstream getting the Saison last year, because it's a style that is not huge, but that was amazing. Very cool. Thank you very much, Caesar. I think we might have got that in 10.
Yeah, you're pretty close. I had to lead you around the garden path a little bit, though. You probably would have got a lot quicker. You went straight to it. You said it, and I'm like,
hang on, I've got to double check that. What's that bald guy talking about?
Because then I was racking my brain on what other Sydney brands have come through the beer awards, and Caesar saying you guys will know it. I'm like, oh god, all I can think of is Sydney Brewing.
Don't overthink it.
Fantastic. All right, so on to sport, and F1 is back after a 5-week break. We head to Miami, one of the most boring tracks with a fake beach in the middle of half the paddock in the stadium nearby. Also, unfortunately, has been contracted till 2041, so we've got to put up with Miami for quite a few more years. We also have Madrid this year, which is a new one, and there's lots of other contracts starting or finishing. Still looks like we'll get 24 plus Grand Prix next year. By the sound of it, Melbourne won't be first one to make up for this year. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain look like they're going to start off the season next year. So what to expect after the break? Well, 5 weeks, I'd say the teams have been very busy. McLaren has said it's bringing 2 new cars. The compression ratio rules haven't come into effect, so anyone with the Mercedes power unit should still be quick.
Not as quick as Mercedes, but they'll be quick.
Yeah. I think the Ferraris will still start well. They've got that smaller turbo, so they can shoot off the line. However, the long straights seem to be where their energy recovery system's not doing as well. So, not sure how they'll go with the long straights at Miami. Aston will still be struggling. And turn 1 at Miami will probably be a disaster. I would say there'll be quite a few crashes there.
Smash fest.
Yeah.
I will like to point out too, there has been a shake-up. Max Verstappen's engineer, Gianpiero Lambrisi, or GP, is leaving Red Bull and joining McLaren in 2027 as the chief racing officer.
Is it 27 or
27? 28.
Yeah.
Apologies. No, you're right. His current contract ends at Red Bull in 27.
Yeah. So they'll get an extra 30 minutes of free practice because it's a sprint round. I still think the power management issues will be issues. Kimi Antonelli did really well last year, so I expect the same with McLaren and perhaps a Ferrari behind. They're the top 3. I don't think anyone else will come close. But yeah, it was interesting with GP signing where that leaves Andrea Stella. I think by the sound of what Zach has said, there's a job for both of them. So,
well, bear in mind he's not the team manager, so that's still Andreas. He's just the chief racing officer. It's almost like sounds like at the moment it's a bit like a sorry, I forgot. I've lost it. A bit like some of the other, almost like a Adrian Newey sort of was last year. For a little bit, he's sort of involved, but he's not actually the team principal or anything along those lines. Yeah.
I watched an interesting video or interview with Damon Hill, and he was being very careful about the words he used to describe the current racing and the cars and technologies. He was being very, very cautious about what he was saying.
The FIA Battery Management Championship, a lot of people aren't happy with it.
Yeah, the interviewer said something about the fact that there was coasting back when he was racing, and he was saying, well, he said, no, we weren't coasting. Like, there were times where he had to actively draft someone to drop temperatures on the turbo or whatever it was, but we're never purposely going 50 kilometers slower than what we could do. And he's been very cautious. It was interesting.
Yeah. You got to remember, ever since they brought in the cost cap, it was always going to happen. Yeah. As soon as you got a life expectancy on the parts that has to last a certain amount of time, they're always going to turn the engines down, as opposed to where previously there were such fine tolerances where they could have an engine for qualifying and then another one for the race.
Yeah.
So that's very much a difference. The other thing I'd note too is that this Miami is if anyone watches the Sky feed, they had a bit of a shake-up with their commentary team this year. Their old American correspondent is no longer there, which is probably lover or hater.
Danica Patrick.
Yeah.
I don't.
So
I don't.
I actually am quite happy because I did find it quite irritating to watch. As someone who watches enough of it to know a little bit more, almost like we know more than she does.
Yeah. I
So
think
nothing against. I actually really like someone like Naomi Schaefer or anything along those lines. People that know what they're doing. Bertie Collins, fantastic.
Yep.
So it's not nothing to do with anything along those lines. Just simply she just doesn't know what she's talking about. Not the F1s anyway.
Yeah. Fair enough. Enough F1. The 6 again disruptor comp, and my poor Tigers are in the headlines again because our captain travelled to PNG with the team's blessing, and he has joined the Chiefs from 2028 with Alex Johnson looking to be signed as number 2 with his PNG heritage. To be honest, I don't care. As long as he continues to lead and perform in his current contract, he'll be 31 when he leaves the Tigers in 18 months. He'll do well in PNG. I know the government is giving players tax-free income. He might take some more Tigers and Panthers with him. I don't have an issue with it at all. The only downside I find is that the Perth Bears didn't have the same rules allowed to them. They weren't allowed to sign anyone until November last year. So I think there's a bit of play in that. And the only other thing I had was that I don't think Melbourne can win again this week. Some bad news about Craig Bellamy came out today.
Yeah.
And I think they're in big trouble.
Mm. Yeah, the health dramas for Craig's not good. I'm surprised, to be honest, not making I don't want to make light of it, but I'm surprised he hasn't had an aneurysm by now, the way he goes on. But it's very sad to hear about Craig. But what I was going to ask or talk about with the PNG. So the PNG companies, I haven't read the full thing, but I know that there's tax free. So is it the PNG government that's tax free?
Yeah. So whenever you work in another country, you have to pay the local tax.
Yes.
So we talked about this like a month ago when the F1 drivers came to Australia. They had to pay tax in Australia for the certain time, so they pissed off real quick, and that's why they all live in Monaco because there's no personal tax. So I think that's perhaps what's happening there with the PNG side, or the NRL is giving them a leg up too.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Is that this is tax free for him, but I'd say that for 12 rounds or whatever a year, or Origin, he's still going to be paying tax when he's back in Australia. So
I don't know how that works with the NRL.
Yeah, they might.
League, but what about our Kiwis and it's not national; it's international rugby league, isn't it?
Yep.
I probably need to do more research on that, but I'm really keen to see the PNG side to come in because it's actually the national sport of PNG, and my ex-father-in-law was from Mount Hagen, and I know how much rugby league is important in PNG. I really want to see them do really well. So it'll be. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why they were allowed to sign so early, whereas the Bears had to wait until 1st of November. But it's the first time I've had a Tigers signing that I'm not angry about because he was open and honest, and he still is going to fulfill his contract. And if he continues to play and lead like he has already and get his payment and team first, yes, he said he was going to be there forever. I thought that was rubbish anyway. But it's the first time I haven't felt bad about doing the contracts. And as long as he fills his contract and plays well and leads well, all the best to him. He'll be 31 when he goes to PNG, and he'll do well there for a couple of years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and 31, like I'm sure they'd have plans in place. 31's getting on a fair bit. You know, he's
Jock Madden did great in the few weeks he's just been recently injured. And the Broncos are paying half his wage, so that's fine with me.
Yeah. Damn it. No, that's all right. It is. I mean, it's always good. At the end of the day, it's very similar to what Glenn Lazarus did when Melbourne started. That you need those experienced players to go in there. He's won grand finals. He knows what to do. He knows, those ins and outs that you're going to have a young side, because at the end of the day, they're going to have to pick up a lot of young players out of the Queensland Cup or New South Wales Cup. So it's going to happen. You're going to have a really young training squad. You need that experience to sort of pull them in the line and say, hey, look, if you go to Melbourne, Craig Bellamy is going to do this to you, or for him it will be going what Benji does or what Ivan Cleary does. And so it'll be invaluable just for the knowledge that he will bring. So it'd be almost like, I don't know, you can't say it's the same, but you'd almost like say you need someone like Cameron Smith as well. That can basically is coaching and playing at the same time. So,
they've got a bit of experience with the Hunters being in the Q Cup, so it's not going to be that far of a stretch. Whereas Perth is probably a little bit more, so they may have been hamstrung. However, they do have Mal, so Mal Meningas as a coach, to the underdog,
how good he is. Don't you, Luke?
Yeah. They've got some good sponsorship. Yeah, it's going to be good. Yep.
And the thing that those guys will do, so like Mal and a couple other kind of big name players, is that they'll drag other players across. Other players who might be like kind of umming and ahhing about going, and they all of a sudden hear that Mal's going to be there and a couple other big name guys that they can learn things off. And
they've got a full squad. So like Nick Meaney, Wishart, they got some good players going over there. A couple from Melbourne, which is interesting. But Athel, how's the aerial ping pong?
Interesting. So talking about Lions, Lions had a good win. For those who went to the game, I got on the big screen because I had my daughter there, and they did a Lion King, so she got up there to start off, which was pretty cool.
And you held your daughter up?
Yeah, 100%. It was great. So a few people saw that. Got a few messages this week for that one.
And did you get a cease and desist from Disney?
Oh, they must pay for it. They use the song, so they must pay for it in some way. So they get the rights, every week they play. So, it's good fun. From the Lions' point of view, they had a good win on the weekend. They won by a fair margin over Adelaide. And Adelaide were in the semi-finals last year, so it's really good to see. But they've had one of their big tools. They've had a lot of their big players mostly back this year, but last year they had lost one of their forwards, Eric Hipwood, from an ACL, and they've just lost Oscar Allen, who was the West Coast Eagles captain. He's just lost 3 weeks for doing his foot or his ankle. I can't remember which foot it is. Yeah. So he's had surgery on that, which is not good. And then talking this week, the big talking point is actually around, so when AFL definitely do it differently, they have a draft system. They also have what they call a father and son rule, or an academy players. Basically, if your father played, say, 100 games for a team, or you're in the academy for that team, when the 18th team who gets picked number 1 and they pick your bloke, you can match them. There's been a bit of controversy because the weighting wasn't quite right, and so they're bringing in this just before the next draft, fixing that, which should make it a little bit more meant to make it fairer for some, but apparently, everything you do is never perfect. So
it
is what it is, but that's okay.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And Super Rugby, I saw a couple of snippets in the mainstream about how successful the Canterbury new stadium was. Did you see any of the games, Angus?
Yeah, I watched all the games except Chiefs and the Draw, which I probably might watch tonight after the potty finishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a mate who went across with three of his mates for the weekend, so they got
Holy
there on the
moly.
Friday and watched all the games.
Yeah.
And he said it was absolutely brilliant weekend, the
Yeah.
whole weekend. The Crusaders, like the people in Canterbury, were absolutely pumped to get a stadium back and having rugby live again. So that was good on the Friday night. So the Crusaders and Waratahs was the first game, and I think the Waratahs scored the first few sets of points. So there's a little bit of concern for the Crusaders fans, but as always, 60 minutes in, Waratahs fell to shit, and the Crusaders ran out. Deserved winners. I had my rugby festival up at Noosa Hinterlands, but last year we had 3 or 4 teams there, so it was like a full afternoon of rugby. But there's only 2 teams there this time, us and West. So we had one game, so we got to watch both of the Saturday games. Reds got stung in Golden Point time, which was
Ouch.
pretty irritating.
Yep.
But geez, it was a good game. Yeah, it took the Blues obviously took them to the full-time whistle.
Yep.
It was a 33 all, and then Fraser unfortunately gave away a penalty pretty much in front of the posts, and Bowden doesn't miss them.
No.
So that was a bugger. But yeah, my mate Chris said it was an awesome weekend, and he said if they do it again next year, they'll go back. So he's thinking about taking his kids over. So might think about taking James over for the weekend and make it a rugby weekend.
That's huge.
Yeah. And the fact that it's on mainstream television tells you how successful the weekend was.
Yeah. Did the Brumbies get up?
No, they got pantsed.
Yeah.
That was the Saturday afternoon game that before that was Hurricanes. So if the Brumbies had beaten that would have been the first Australian team ever to sweep against all New Zealand teams. But
yeah.
Unfortunately, they were playing the Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes absolutely pulled the pants down.
Yeah, yeah.
Every facet of play. The Brumbies got 12 points, which is some of them were pretty lucky.
Yeah.
45 to 12. So yeah, Hurricanes did a number on them. Yeah.
I did see a stat from the weekend, and technically, of the 3 codes that we play, AFL, NRL, and rugby had the highest percentage of attendance at their games.
Because at all at the stadium, yeah.
Yeah, the sellout stadium at 25,000.
Yeah, it only holds 25,000.
But it's so good. So good for rugby in New Zealand and so good for Canterbury. That's so good that the money they invested has turned out that well. I'm really stoked.
Yeah, Chris was talking to my mate. Chris was talking to one of the Canterbury locals.
Yeah,
and he was saying, like, if you can find a silver lining in the earthquakes, right? So Chris went across 10 years ago and 10 years before that to watch the Crusaders play. So he went over just after the earthquakes, and like it was all just rubble.
Yeah.
And then 10 years after that, it was all shipping containers because they hadn't rebuilt yet. And then this year it was all fully rebuilt, no shipping containers, it was all done. And so this Canterbury guy was saying, like, if you're finding a silver lining, it's the best thing that happened because the stadium is right smack bang in the middle of the city. Wherever you're in the city, you can see the stadium. It's like 10, 12, 15 minutes walk from pretty much all the surrounding suburbs. And it's been planned really well because obviously the whole city got destroyed, so they fully planned it out.
Yeah.
So this Canterbury guy was saying, it's in a way it's kind of the best thing that's ever happened to Canterbury, and that they've just completely redone the whole city from scratch.
They could plan it again and make everything 20 years, but for a 20-minute walk everywhere.
Yeah, plan it properly. Yeah.
Good on them. And did you end up at Noosa Hinterland?
Yeah, we went across there. Had quite a lot of beers. Quite a lot. But Might have been a boat race or two.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
How'd you go off the rain?
It rained on the way up. Oh, bucketed down driving out of Brisbane, and we got there and it was raining. Like paid registration. Started warming up. Stopped raining. Went on the field. Played for. Played 3 lots of 20-minute thirds, so it's probably about an hour and a half by the time we finished playing. So no rain for about an hour and 40 minutes. Peed down rain. We started warming up. Stopped raining. Finished the game. Walked under cover. Peed down rain.
That's almost the worst way to do it. I'd rather it be fine and dry while you're warming up and then rains while you're playing.
No,
personally, because you're too focused on the game. But when you're warming up, well, you can go, oh, this is a bit shit.
No, the worst one was playing rugby league in Gyra in snow and sleet.
Ooh, yeah.
And the sleet cuts you, like literally cuts you. But no one wants to get tackled because they don't want to end up in the snow. So it was like touch footy.
My wife used to, is from Cowra, and she used to play hockey out around Orange and even go up as far as Tenterfield, up to Glandis and that sort of stuff. And yeah, getting the hockey ball to hit you when in the minus temperatures is not good.
No.
I think when I said warm up, I think you had a higher expectation than reality, Caesar.
You know what?
We weren't running around or anything. We were just under the sheds doing like the minimum amount of stretching and.
Yeah, that's fair.
I
will say though, I used to not warm up. I used really bad for not warming up, and I found I used to play touch, and then occasionally I had to play double games, and I found the second game I always played better because I was warm, and I really learnt the value of actually warming up meant that I could go longer. As a fat man who was really limited on how far he could go anyway, I definitely don't underestimate the power of warming up anymore. But I get you. I do see your point. You're playing veterans rugby. It's not exactly fast.
And I think that wraps up the pod for today. Fat man warms up. I think that is the and we may have a special guest next week. So join us on Basement Quality Banter episode 53. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Jump on our socials if you feel like jumping in and ask us any questions or any feedback. We love it. And we will see everyone next week.
All right. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Caesar. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.